You're watching My Paris TV.
Some of the fondest memories that we have during our lifetime comes from our childhood, and that statement certainly applies to me. My granddad, Rick Revel, who was married to my grandma, Nona, would bring me to this park in McKenzie, Tennessee when I was a little boy. I remember seeing old men sitting on park benches, whittling on wood and carving out tiny statues. Known as Veterans Memorial Park today, I've had the privilege of doing ceremonies here to honor those who fought for our country. The sidewalk is lined with the names of those who served in our military. Although my granddad's name is not listed here, he did fight for his country during the First World War. When I was about 5 years old, my granddad brought me to the park to see this artillery piece. It's been sitting in this very spot since 1929. He said while he was in the army fighting over in France, the Germans fired at him with artillery pieces just like this. Being a young boy, I clung to his every word. As I began to write this story, I found out that my granddad was right. As I did my research, I discovered that this artillery piece was built in Germany by Krupp Manufacturing. And stamped on the muzzle of the artillery piece are the Latin words ultima ratio regum, which translates into English to say the last argument of kings. Because of my dad and my granddad, I've always had a fascination with all things military. Not far from McKenzie, there's a place that restores weapons of war like this, and that's going to be our next destination on History Highway.
One, two, three. We're gonna drive in every day, and somewhere along the way, there's a road sign with a story from the past. History is everywhere, and I'm gonna take you there. So buckle up tight, we're going there real fast. So take a ride down the history highway. We're headed back to the days of old. So take a ride down the history highway. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm moving this Chevy.
It's never a gamble when you come to State Line Ranch and Home. Give me one here, boys.
We have Western motif furniture, gifts and collectibles, clothing for the whole family, a huge selection of straw and felt hats, and acres of boots for cowboys and cowgirls. We even have all the items a pickiest horse lover might ever need.
Looks like I done caught me one a cheating. Got a card up under his hat. Just says State Line Ranch and Home in Hazel, Kentucky. Here in the reference room at Big Bore, I tell you what, this is the coolest place I've been to in a long time. This is where all things military are restored. Standing next to me is Ira Sellars. He's the owner of Big Bore, and he's going to tell us about some of the World War II items he has here. Let's start with this gun here. I'm really curious about it.
Browning gun, Browning design, Browning 30 caliber. Water-cooled guns. Most of the guns started being water-cooled. Maxim, Browning, whether it's in 30, whether it's in 50. Went to aircraft. That way they could, went to air-cooled. That way they could go ahead and not be hauling around a whole bunch of water and a whole bunch of extra weight and parts.
Right.
So this would have been guns that would have, the design themselves would have started in World War One, pre-World War One, and all of them were used in World War Two.
And you told me something crazy about this one a while ago. You said although this was kind of post-World War One and used in World War II some, tell me about what happened in South America with this gun.
The longer jacket versions, water-cooled 50s, were used commonly by the U.S. military. They were a longer jacket, longer gun. So when people look at this, they think it kind of looks different, because it does. Most of these are referred to of designations of both as commercial models, the short jacket, kind of slimmer line, because they were sold mainly to companies. They were sold to companies, they were sold to mining companies, they were sold to railroad companies. This is basically how you dealt with claim jumpers. This is how you dealt with security in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. When you had somebody that you had to actually go and keep off your property or suppress people, you dealt with it this way.
Kind of like the Thompson machine gun, it kind of got its popularity during civilian times.
Very much so.
So that's kind of interesting. This particular gun, which you think should be just all military, it got quite the popularity.
Very much so. It carried that the Colt commercial nomenclature is commonly used for.
Cool beans, I love it. Now this gun, this is the one my producer Ken, he loved it. He was asking you questions about this particular gun, and it kind of surprised me. This is actually an aviation gun.
Yes, it is.
Tell me more about this one.
This is a Hispano, so this is a Hispano Suiza design. The U.S. used them, but mainly the British used them.
Okay.
So Spitfires, Hawker Hurricanes.
Wow.
They were almost generally always used. They were used predominantly more in aircraft than they were for ground mount. There were ground mount situations, usually for naval, but they were predominantly an aircraft gun. If you look at even just the unlocking system, this right here to charge the gun, there'd be a cable to it. So you would have pneumatic or cable charging. It didn't come with a way to manually charge it.
Now this would be mounted to the wing?
Wing, fuselage, even engine. So root. They were used usually if it's going to be mounted on the wings on aircraft because the stress to the structure.
Right.
They were usually moved in closer to the fuselage.
Right. Cool beans. And one of the things you promised me sometime we're going to do is have a weenie roast with one of your flamethrowers. Tell me something about the flamethrowers you have here.
Flamethrowers are always something that people pay quite a bit of attention to because they are incredibly visual, whether you're running around with them or using them. Flamethrowers, World War II flamethrowers, a lot of the World War II flamethrowers are still floating around now. They were converted to gas. So they used them for tear gas, CS gas, things of that nature after the war and stayed in the U.S. So there's actually a lot of U.S. World War II flamethrowers that are still in circulation that were used by PDs. That's a World War II U.S. version, and this one right here is a really rare version. It's an Italian.
It's an Italian version. Wow.
So the Italians had them. The Chinese had a World War II version. Wow. The Germans had one that's just looks like a big donut. Everyone had.
Oh, really?
Yes, big giant donut-looking thing with the pressure tank.
Right.
Which this would be a semi-modern pressure tank.
Right.
So the pressure tank went in the center of that donut. This would be a World War II pressure tank, and this is your pressure tank. So that's what holds your pressure that propels your fluid.
Okay, good.
So everyone had them though. So I mean, it wasn't just one nation had this one. Everyone did a lot of design work during World War II for flamethrowers.
What got you started? What was the love?
Always liked mechanical things, always liked firearms, just in general working with them, being around that stuff. The biggest thing was when you see stuff that's incredibly unique, like aircraft guns. I started a lot of times with aircraft guns.
Right.
People would say, well, this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, or you have, it's hard to get this. Right. Well, why not? Somebody else made it work. How hard could it be?
Sure.
So just starting to work with aircraft guns is probably what started me doing a lot of this.
Could we step out into the shop? I'd like to see what the naval deck guns look like.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's do that. You know, earlier we were talking about Camp Tyson and the barrage balloons. Well, out in the big drink, or the ocean there, were naval vessels. And this is some of the deck guns that might have been on some of the naval vessels, on destroyers. And what else was it?
These guns would have been started, the 3-inch 50 design was started in the early 1900s.
Wow.
Like, right at the end of 1800s, early 1900s. The early marks would have been put out even before World War I. Now everything was pressed into service and used. So they had marks all the way up to Mark 12s. They would have went on everything from your frigates, from escorts, even submarines. They used them for everything. But the early guns, these ones being earlier guns, probably were reserved for those smaller vessels, destroyers, frigates, escorts, things of that nature.
Right.
But everything had them. Everything had 3-inch 50s. The larger your boat, larger you could put armament, so they went up to 5-inch and things of that nature. Wow. But these things were backbones. There was, thousands, tens of thousands of these guns made, enormous amount.
He even has some ordnance that goes with it. Let's take a look at the ordnance.
Sure. Most of these guns, if they were going to be designed as dual-purpose guns,
right.
almost always they were looking at dual-purpose guns. Most
right.
of these guns are designed as dual-purpose guns no matter what.
Right.
So you would start with an AP round, and then you would have a payload round.
Okay.
And it's funny because even in the U.S. Navy had AP rounds for their 3-inch 50s, and that's what that is. That's an armor-piercing capped round. So they have the cap so it'll fly straight. They have an armor-piercing core so it'll actually pierce before it detonates.
Gotcha.
These are just an air bursting round. So you have a thin shell and then an HE payload. One unique thing about a lot of these rounds, is what people don't think about, is that's probably something that won the war.
Wow.
Because if you hadn't had a radio fuse that was highly classified at the time, it would only take one kamikaze or one plane to sink an entire battleship or an aircraft carrier. If we hadn't come up with those, we probably never would have made it through Midway.
Tell us this deck gun here, it was the craziest story behind this one. A can company made it?
Yep. Everyone was in. It was all in. Everyone. Every single person. You were saving your waste fats to go back to ordnance. You were saving any of your scrap to go back to guns. You were saving any of your tires. Everyone was in on it, including the companies. That gun there was made by GM, Fisher Body Parts.
Wow.
This gun was made by a canning company in Chicago. So you find a lot of these guns that were made in 40, 41, 42, 43. They're made by companies you wouldn't think normally produce ordnance or guns, but everyone was in. It was all in from the base level, from the citizen to the corporation as well.
Wow. Ira, I appreciate your time. This has been a great segment of the show.
No problem. Enjoyed having you.
Yes. We're keeping history alive on History Highway. We'll be right back. In my book, In the Hills of Tennessee, Senator John Bell compares Jack Henson to Colonel David Crockett. He says he's the best shot in all the state of Tennessee ever since Crockett died at the Alamo. General Nathan Bedford Forrest, why, he called Jack Henson the man with the sure shot. If you want to go on a true adventure, you need to read In the Hills of Tennessee. Get your copy today. In my book, In the Hills of Tennessee, the storyline takes place in Dover in Stewart County, where Fort Donelson is located. Not too long before the leaves began to fall, we filmed a couple of segments there, and that place is dear to my heart, and I want to share it with you. I was 11 years of age when I made my first trip to Fort Donelson, and I've been back here many a time since then. I love walking over the hallowed ground and listening to the voices of the past as they speak to me. And it seems like each one keeps asking me to tell their story and keep their tiny place in history alive. This is the Widow Crisp home, the headquarters for General Ulysses S. Grant. He picked out this location himself. He liked it because he could see Fort Donelson from here. Ironically, they call it the Widow Crisp home. She was not a widow yet. Her husband didn't die until 3 weeks after the battle was over. From here, I'm going to get back in the car, and I'm going to take you on a tour of Fort Donelson. On April 12th of 1861, when the Battle of Fort Sumter was taking place, the citizens of Stewart County, Tennessee, they felt safe because the war was taking place hundreds of miles from their home.
Less than a year later, on February 6th of 1862, first came the Battle of Fort Henry, then the Battle of Fort Donelson. Their homes were being invaded. Stewart County now knows what war is all about. And their lives will be altered for generations to come.
In a strategy devised by General Winfield Scott, the overall commander of the Union Army, the Anaconda Plan was to encompass and constrict the South until the Union forces could squeeze the life out of the Confederacy. Setting their sights first on Fort Henry on the Tennessee River, the Federal Navy attacked. Built on a floodplain, Fort Henry was filled with water from a recent rainstorm. Outgunned and outnumbered, the Confederates surrendered within 75 minutes, and victory came easy for the boys in blue. The commander of the Union Army, Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, now turned his eyes toward Fort Donelson on the Cumberland River.
On February 14th of 1862, Admiral Foote's gunboats attacked Fort Donelson, and they were hoping for a quick victory. When Confederate artillerymen opened up, they exchanged iron valentines with the enemy for well over an hour. Receiving heavy damage, the Union gunboats would retreat down the Cumberland River. When you come to Fort Donelson, you'll get a chance to stand on the very spot where those soldiers stood, and you get a chance to glance down the river where those Union gunboats retreat. This little building is a replica of what the soldiers would live in. It's called a shanty. There was hundreds of them scattered across the hillsides here at Fort Donelson. Tiny structure like this, it would hold anywhere from 2 to 4 men. Life of a soldier, it was hard. And here at Fort Donelson, it was deadly. This is a 6-pound Napoleon, a smoothbore. It's sitting in a position where Porter's battery would sit. During the Battle of Fort Donelson, Porter's battery saw a lot of action. It's positioned at a place called the outer works or the earthworks, rifle pits, parapets. This was the outer protection for Fort Donelson. It is said by some when they come here in the still of the night, when things get real quiet, it is said that you can hear the voices of those soldiers and the artillerymen shouting out the orders. Sometimes you can even hear the gunfire in the distance.
For 5 bloody days, Confederate and Union forces locked horns, and the hills of Tennessee were painted red. By February 15th, it looked as if Confederate forces would be the victors. But as fate would have it, on February 16th of 1862, Generals Buckner, Floyd, and Pillow would grow faint of heart and surrender over 13,000 Confederate soldiers to the Union Army.
I've heard historians say that the Battle of Fort Donelson is where the Union Army won the Civil War. Just took another 3 years to convince the Confederates of that. Standing here on the front porch of the Dover Inn and Tavern, or better known as the Surrender House. This is where General Simon Buckner would surrender to his old West Point friend, General Ulysses S. Grant. When you come here to Fort Donelson, you'll get a chance to walk in the very same footprints of a future president, President Ulysses S. Grant. The National Cemetery at Fort Donelson has been here since 1867, and it's the final resting place of heroes of yesteryear. I would like to invite you to come see Fort Donelson, a place that's dear to my heart. And while you're here, take time to pay your respects to those who gave their all. 'Cause no matter if they wore blue or gray, they were all Americans.
You're watching History Highway!
Just as we were wrapping up our film shoot at Fort Donelson, I got word that a riverboat had arrived at Dover Landing. I've always wanted to sing about a riverboat, and when I do, I want to do it like Stephen Foster might have done it back in the 1800s, and let my banjo ring. Ever since there's been steamboats, they've been stopping here at Dover. That's what we want to talk about today. Of course, the Queen of the Mississippi's here. She's part of the American cruise ship line. Not too long ago, I wrote a song about her called The Queen of the Mississippi, and I want to sing it for you. Going down to the river, gonna take me a trip. I'm headed to St. Louis on the Queen of the Mississippi. I'm gonna see my gal, got my bags on my hip. Strutting like a peacock on Queen of the Mississippi. She's a riverboat, son, don't call her no ship. Riding high in the water, the Queen of the Mississippi. Yeah! My lady is a looker, she's got the sweetest lips. I met her last summer on the Queen of the Mississippi. Kissing in the moonlight, we made my heart skip. I fell in love that night on the Queen of the Mississippi. She's a riverboat, son, don't call her no ship. Riding high in the water, the Queen of the Mississippi. My gal is a teacher, she's smart as a whip. She taught me about the birds and bees on the Queen of the Mississippi. Now, Captain, won't you hurry? Bring her up to a full clip. Let that black smoke roll on the Queen of the Mississippi. She's a riverboat, son, don't call her no ship. Riding high in the water, the Queen of the Mississippi. She's a riverboat, son, don't call her no ship. Riding high in the water, the Queen of the Mississippi. Yeah!
My crew keeps me on the road from episode to episode, 'cause they all know I got a million stories to tell. And I'm no dinosaur, it's cool to explore what makes a country great and put the crack in the Liberty Bell. So take a ride down the history highway. We're headed back to the days of old. So take a ride down the history highway. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm letting this Chevy roll. I got the pedal to the metal and I'm letting this Chevy